This the January 8th, 2025. I'm going to have to get used to that. Meeting of the Planning Commission. Our quorum just walked in, but I would ask Mr. Linkus to do the honors.
Here.
Here.
Mr. Woodman.
Here.
Vice Chair Farr.
Here.
Chair Rice.
We have a quorum. First order of business is determination of or approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, sir. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The next item, my glasses for this, is a public hearing for SUP, Special Use Permit 2024-00850, a request by Network Towers LLC for a special use permit to allow a 199-foot monopole wireless telecommunications tower freestanding. The property is owned by SR Goff Hauling, Inc., and is located at 6000 North Fork Road, Elliston, northeast of Roanoke Road, U.S. Route 11. I would like to turn it over to Ms. Wright for her presentation.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Before you, we have the vicinity map showing the location of the proposed site. It is on the left where the star is. It's in the central eastern part of the county, in the Shawsville, Elliston, Lafayette area. On the right is the more zoomed in location where the star is located, showing the proximity to Roanoke County and Interstate 81, as well as Roanoke Road or U.S. Route 11 460. On the left, we have an aerial map showing the proposed site in the Elliston Lafayette Industrial Park, outlined in yellow. It is on the corner of North Fork Road, and on the upper part of the property and the back side of the property is Enterprise Drive. To the right, we have the zoning map, which shows a lot of colors. We have agricultural and manufacturing, planned industrial, and across the highway, we have some various other zonings which represent residential, business, and commercial enterprises. The request summary for this site is, it is zoned manufacturing M1 on 3.914 acres in the Elliston Lafayette Industrial Park. The request is to allow a 190-foot monopole style freestanding telecommunications tower with a 4-foot lightning rod, which would equal 199 feet total height. The proposed lease space is 52 feet by 65 feet, which equals 3,380 square feet, and the fenced area would be 42 by 55, which equals 2,310 square feet. The tower is proposed to provide at least three co-location opportunities. Here's the site plan, which shows the location in the upper part of the site along Enterprise Road. This is an elevation tower site that shows the proposed location of the antennas that will be placed on the pole. Some of the photographs that we took on the left is North Fork Road going toward Roanoke Street, and to the right is North Fork Road going the opposite direction, and that is the entrance into the industrial park. On the left here, you see this is taken from the entrance to the water treatment facility, which is facing north, and the proposed site is on the left where the trailers are parked. On the right is Enterprise Drive, and the proposed site is on the right of the photo. This is the proposed site as it is seen from the water treatment facility entrance off of Enterprise Drive. As I stated before, the proposed site is 52 by 65 leased space with a security fenced-in area of 42 by 55. Some added context for this is the Elliston Lafayette Industrial Park. This is Lot 1 in that park, and a special use permit was approved in 1985 for a truck repair, storage shop, and office establishment for SR Golf Hauling, with a condition to comply with declaration of protective covenants, easements, reservations, and establishment of the Elliston Lafayette Industry Park in Montgomery County, Virginia. Covenant 17 states that improvements erected on any lot shall not exceed 50 feet in height, except for towers, wireless, or television masts. Without written approval of the zoning administrator, this would not be allowed. So the request was evaluated by the zoning administrator with the county attorney, which determined that impacts from a 199-foot structure would be minimal, and they granted approval for the exceeded height request. The zoning administrator's review was not to determine the appropriateness of the proposed use at this site. That was not evaluated by the zoning administrator. Some impacts to consider are transportation and traffic, which are low impact as the roads are generally used by industrial traffic within the park, and VDOT took no exception to the request. Montgomery County Public Service Authority does have lines near the proposed site, but had no concerns regarding the proximity of the proposed tower to the lines, nor the water treatment facility located adjacent to the site. The PSA recommends that Miss Utility is called to have the site marked prior to any site work. Water and sewer will not be required for this use. The site is not located in a FEMA-designated flood zone. During review of the site plan application, the site will be evaluated for compliance with erosion and sediment control standards and stormwater requirements. No land disturbance permitting is required as the project is less than 10,000 square feet of land disturbance, and minimization of sediment and pollutants is expected and will be monitored. The proposed site will not produce any off-site noise. The tower will have a steel finish that is not reflective and does not produce glare per the supplemental regulations, and no additional lighting is proposed. The FAA has not required the tower to have air navigation lighting and will only deploy FCC required site identification and emergency signage. The setbacks in the M1 zone are different from what you're used to seeing a tower that has previously been done in agricultural zones. Here we have listed the required setbacks for the M1 zone and what the applicant has proposed for each one, which exceeds the minimum setback requirements. The comprehensive plan identifies this area as village expansion and mixed use, which describes it as areas of interest associated with designated villages. It encourages appropriate development while maintaining existing character. And for the industrial mixed-use area, it must be deemed most appropriate for industrial, other uses permitted if deemed appropriate or in character with the existing village development patterns. Here we have some comprehensive plan objectives that are being met. Comprehensive plan encourages co-location on existing towers or other structures. This will support 3 additional co-locations. Newly constructed towers should be located to provide the least negative impact on citizens of the jurisdiction, and new towers should be evaluated for their potential effects on surrounding jurisdictions, as well as the jurisdiction where the tower is constructed. Based on the application materials, the proposed location could be characterized as the most preferred location in an industrial park, in an urban expansion, village expansion, or villages. The application in support of that cooperation that we want with surrounding jurisdictions, the application materials were sent to Roanoke County for review, but a response has not been received. Other relevant comprehensive plan policies include orderly extension of electric service and telecommunication service, as well as promoting and facilitating the provision of superior law enforcement and emergency services. The 195-foot monopole tower with an additional 4-foot lightning rod proposes to improve voice and advanced data communications for citizens, travelers, and emergency services. The tower will be used by T-Mobile and will be potentially available for other cellular providers, and there are opportunities for co-location. The proposed site will be required to meet county landscaping codes, which will be evaluated during the site plan review. A balloon test was not performed. Although previous applications have included existing and anticipated coverage maps, the Code of Virginia now prohibits us from asking for that documentation. However, I will note that the applicant is here and they have their own PowerPoint presentation to give, and it does include the current coverage map and the anticipated coverage. Supplemental regulations that are also required to be adhered to in addition to any conditions that you place on the tower is that the towers shall be maintained with a galvanized steel finish or painted with a neutral color. Dish antennas shall be neutral and non-reflective in color. No logos or advertising of any kind shall be permitted on towers, antennas, or any accompanying structures or facilities. A written agreement for permitting future locations of telecommunications towers facilities will be provided by the tower owner and maintained to the satisfaction of the zoning administrator. A written agreement assuring prompt removal of the tower upon abandonment at the responsibility and cost of the tower owner and/or landowner shall be provided and maintained to the satisfaction of the zoning administrator. And all towers shall comply with all FAA requirements, including those related to the Virginia Tech Airport. Staff recommends approval of the request for a special use permit to allow the 199-foot total freestanding telecommunications tower, 195 feet with a 4-foot lightning rod with following conditions. The tower shall not exceed a height of 195, including the 4-foot proposed lightning rod, for a total of 199 feet with a ground elevation of 1417 above mean sea level. The tower shall not have lighting unless required by the FAA. Site development shall be in general conformance with concept plans submitted with the special use permit application entitled NT Site Name, Elliston, NT Site ID, Virginia, T24.07, dated November 1, 2024. And the tower shall be of monopole design, and dishes shall not be installed above the lowest co-location elevation. All wiring and cables shall be located inside the monopole structure. All adjoining property owners were notified in accordance with code. Public hearing sign was placed on the property to announce the application. Legal ads were published per code. Staff has received no inquiries related to this request. However, additional comments may be received during the public hearing. A representative for Network Towers, the applicant, Sam, is here for any questions, as well as Lori Schweller. And the property owner, a representative of the property owner, SR Goff, is here as well for any questions that you may have. Do you have any questions for me before I turn it over?
Miller.
Ms. Wright, I think somewhere in our language, not in this presentation, we have provision for emergency services co-location. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we have been provided a letter, the required documentation and letter saying that it will be available for them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other questions of Ms. Wright? Thank you.
Thank you.
I would invite the applicant. I understand you have a dog and pony show for us tonight.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Lori Schweller, attorney with Williams Mullen, representing Network Towers, your applicant. And as Ms. Wright noted, Sam Maverna with Network Towers is here as well. Let's see if I can. So I think Ms. Wright gave you such a thorough presentation. I'll try not to repeat some of this information you've heard. You understand the proposal and the location between I-81 and Roanoke Road. I guess I'll talk a little bit about the need for this site. This area, as the property owner will tell you, is sorely insufficient with data and voice coverage. So this is important for the businesses in the area, residents in the area. It's important for the fire department, which Sam has spoken with representatives from the fire department who confirmed that, and the schools in the area. And so bringing this type of service to the area will be a real boon for business, for convenience, for health and safety, as well as things like working from home, schoolwork from home, all those modern conveniences that we're used to having and need to have with good cell service. This is a propagation map provided by T-Mobile, which is proposed to be the anchor tenant on this facility. And what you see here is the two existing T-Mobile sites are shown as blue windmills, and you can see very good coverage in the green shaded areas all the way to very marginal coverage in violet. And the proposed project is shown in the center where the star is. With that new site, we can expect that center area to have very good in-building coverage as well as connectivity as you move through the area on those local roads and interstate and highways. Again, the site far exceeds all the required setbacks. It's also over 700 feet from the nearest dwelling, and it's going to be situated such that it won't interfere with existing industrial commercial uses. The schematic elevation shows you how the top location where T-Mobile will have its antennas is at 195, but there will be room for other wireless providers to co-locate on this Network Towers facility. And then surrounding that site will be a board-on-board fence and such landscaping as the county will require. So we're happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Ms. Weller, just for a case of editing, it's Eastern Montgomery High and Elementary.
Oh,
And you're
thank you.
It says East. I don't think it's significant, but thank you.
Thank you for letting us know.
Are there other questions of Ms. Schweller? That was very informative. I like the, I know we're not supposed to ask for it, but I like the propagation map.
They're very satisfying when you see those blank spaces get filled in.
It'd probably take 2,000 feet to reach all of the valleys and hidden spots in the county, but this is helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Do any of your compatriots have any comments they would? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, let's open this up for a public hearing. Anyone wishing to address the commission with respect to this application? Seeing none, we will discuss this item amongst ourselves. Are there any comments, observations, questions?
Mr. Vice Chair, if I could
Yes, sir.
offer a motion to approve the application as presented by staff with the recommended
Motion by Mr. Kroll to approve the staff's recommendation with conditions.
Second.
Second by Mr. Miller. Mr. Linkus?
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for your presentation. The next item is public address. Anyone here that wishes to speak to any topic other than the public hearing? Now's the time, and seeing none, we will close the public address and move to old business, and there are no items of old business. And I do not have anything for the new business, although I see it on the agenda.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, due to the absence of several of our liaisons this evening, staff would recommend a motion to defer liaison appointments until the February meeting.
Is there a motion to that effect, or you just want a consensus?
We would need a motion since it's on.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to defer to the February meeting. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we have no liaison report. Oh, you have a work program, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. So I'm not Ms. Hopkins. She regrets that she couldn't join us this evening, so I'm going to run through a recap of our 2024 work program and then discussion of potential items for the 2025 work program. As you'll remember, back in March, we set the work program for 2024. We had several topics that we wanted to cover in 2024 between the commission and staff. The first of which was the project that staff spent the most time working on last year, which was our comprehensive planning efforts in Montgomery Matters. Staff does continue to work with our consulting team on Montgomery Matters. We are at the point that we now have some draft goals that were shared with you back in December. Those are currently being workshopped with the steering committee and our stakeholder groups. And then we'll be putting those back out for a public survey for the community to provide feedback on those goals. Our hope is to get that survey launched at the end of this month to give ourselves several weeks to be able to gain that feedback from the public. The current plan with that is to do an online survey, but have hard copy components available in several high traffic areas throughout the county. Our hope will also be to work with Montgomery County Public Schools to distribute that through the school network, and we can get those to parents and students so that we can work to broaden our outreach and get feedback on those goals. We also had on the work program for 2024 some transportation planning. I will update you that staff did submit applications, as we shared with you, for round 6 of Smart Scale. We also had on the work plan an update to the transportation plan to include additional projects to be identified and then to remove those projects that were funded. We have at the staff level done a review of the existing projects listed in the transportation plan, and we will be bringing those forward as we update Montgomery Matters. Then we'll just do that as one package, since the transportation plan is our transportation chapter for Montgomery Matters. So you'll be seeing that. Our hope is going to be in the third quarter of 2025 as we wrap up our comprehensive plan efforts. We continue to work on issues related to housing through the Regional Housing Study. We had on the work program that any legislation that was referred to the Planning Commission by the board due to General Assembly action, we would have that on our plan. Thankfully, last year, no new legislation was enacted related to housing. We do know that there are a number of bills at the General Assembly related to affordable housing, short-term rentals, accessory dwelling units, that we'll be seeing in this General Assembly session. So I would imagine there will be a lot more discussion about housing as we go forward as it relates to potential changes that we would need to make in our zoning ordinance. Staff continues to support the various housing trust committees that the county is a part of through representation from Bree as our Director of Planning, Chris Lawrence, our Deputy County Administrator, and other staff members who attend those meetings. Training was another item that was on the 2024 work plan. We hosted another successful Regional Planning Commissioners training that many of you were able to attend. And then we also held the presentation from Scott Woodrum, Assistant County Administrator, related to stormwater and erosion and sediment control. Our hope as we move forward, and you'll see this in the 2025 work plan, is that we can continue to bring those opportunities for you all to get some more training and education about other aspects of county governance that relate to your work as planning commissioners. Text amendments were the last item that we had on the 2024 work program. We had on there that we would be working with the consultant to develop a new zoning ordinance. That is still in development. We're working on getting that RFP ready to go out no later than June so that we can get a consultant on board. Some of that delay was that we wanted to ensure that we were far enough along with a comprehensive plan so that the recommendations and the goals that the comp plan were generating really guided what we were doing with the zoning ordinance. Waiting until June to begin that will also allow us to get through this year's General Assembly session so that we can make sure that we are in line with all the legislation that might be coming out of the General Assembly. As I noted, we didn't have any new legislation that impacted our zoning ordinance last year and required text amendments. And though it seems very, very long ago, we did enact through the Board of Supervisors action the updates to the zoning ordinance related to utility scale solar that was adopted by the board back in February. So we had an ambitious work plan in 2024. As you can see there in green, we accomplished a number of those goals. There in orange are the things that are still in development, but there were some items we just didn't get to last year. So looking into 2025, staff has brought forward these 5 bullets for you for consideration for your work program for 2025. Again, continuing our comprehensive planning efforts with the consultant. Our goal in this year is also to begin our village planning efforts. We'll have a more robust update for you in the coming months. We discussed back in December the methodology we were developing to define villages and how we see growth and development occurring within the village areas. Staff has a meeting this week with the consulting team to discuss that, and we'll be sharing that with you in the coming months as we get ready to begin our village outreach efforts. In terms of transportation planning, we are in an off-cycle year for smart scales, much to staff's joy. We don't have to develop any funding applications for smart scale this year. However, we still will be working with the transportation plan to identify additional projects. And again, as I said, bring forward some updates to the plan. We'll also continue efforts to identify new and alternative funding sources for those priority projects. We know that Smart Scale and the Highway Safety Improvements Programs money, which is what we've been most successful with in getting funding for county projects, those are not the only funding sources available to us. So staff will be working to identify additional sources where we can get some of these priority projects funded and executed here in the county. We also are very excited working with county administration, working to include transportation projects within the county's capital improvements program. This is a recommendation that staff has received from VDOT and other representatives on increasing our likelihood of receiving funding by having these projects listed in the CIP. It also helps us to identify projects for the Board of Supervisors that are going to be very large ticket items and things that the board and the county going forward in the next 5 to 10 years will consider in terms of funding to make sure that these projects happen. I don't believe it will be a surprise to any of you that construction costs continue to rise. And when we are bidding projects 6 years in the future, those costs tend to rise and get larger as we get closer to construction. So having those included in the CIP gives us an additional cushion for providing that funding to ensure these projects are constructed. Again, related to housing, many of these are going to be a repeat from last year. As I noted, we do anticipate some housing-related bills to come out of the General Assembly. Several of those, as I mentioned, relate to affordable housing, where housing can be built by right, particularly accessory dwelling units being permitted by right. There's also a piece of legislation that we're watching related to the ability of faith communities to build housing on their properties. That's an interesting bill because generally houses of worship and their lands are tax exempt. So when you're building housing on those properties and you'll be bringing in rental income, how does that impact taxation? So that's going to be a big question that will be asked at the General Assembly this year. Continuing that support of the Housing Trust Fund committees. And then staff has also identified the need to review the zoning ordinance as it relates to manufactured housing. We've had a number of questions over the past several years about requiring special use permits to construct manufactured housing in certain zoning districts. That is a request that we've received from several members of the Board of Supervisors to study that more, and staff is going to be looking at whether that is something we need to consider prior to the overall update of the zoning ordinance. In terms of training, we again want to bring more training opportunities to you, particularly in the areas of infrastructure and hazard mitigation. Kim has been leading up staff's efforts to work with the New River Valley Regional Commission on the Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan. That has been a really eye-opening document for staff, and we want to make sure that we're keeping you in the loop on how the county and the region are preparing for natural disasters, both through flooding and wildfire, which we've seen in the county in the past year. And then continuation again from the 2024 work program or any text amendments that might result from the 2025 General Assembly session and working with our consultant, as I mentioned, to get that updated zoning ordinance begun by the end of 2025. So at this time, I will ask if there are any additions you all would like to see added to the work program for 2025, any additional training topics that you would like to get some information on, and staff can include those in, but we'll move forward if there's no objection.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Miller?
Just a little of a question. Do you have any prognostication as to where the General Assembly may go with solar issues? Sounds like they're pretty heavy-handed right now.
Yes, and so I was in Richmond last week for an APA Virginia board meeting, and we talked extensively about the solar bill that came out of the electric utilities advisory group, on which several members of the House of Delegates and the Senate sit. The bill that is advancing, to put it in a nutshell, would create a statewide board that would evaluate solar projects that are deemed to be of statewide significance. That number of megawatts that's been determined to be statewide significance is 20 megawatts or larger. The basic idea there is that if a locality were to deny a solar project that was of statewide significance, that an applicant could go to this statewide board and appeal that decision. And if the board determines that the creation of that project is in the interest of the state, the locality would be overruled and the project would be able to advance forward. There is an appeal for the landowner, the locality to the circuit court included in the text of that bill. However, one thing that we at APA find very troubling and we here at staff find very troubling is that there is no standing for adjacent property owners to appeal a decision of that board. Wow. Both APA Virginia and the Virginia Association of Counties are opposing that bill in the legislature. We view, and staff agrees, it is a very serious affront to local authority. So we worry that it is a very slippery slope for a statewide board appointed in Richmond to be making decisions at the locality level. It is also of interest to note that the majority of the individuals that are proposed to sit on that body are from more urban counties where these projects would not be located. So they would be making decisions for rural localities. So it is a challenging bill. We will be opposing it. But that is the major bill that we have seen pre-filed for this year's General Assembly. I will note that there were several members of the authority that recommended this to the General Assembly who voted to advance it but have serious concerns, but they wanted to get it to the floor to be able to talk about those concerns. So we don't know how that's going to go. There is a very, very strong solar lobby at the General Assembly wanting to push this through, but we'll keep you updated as we learn more.
Well, with the acres and acres of data centers that use more electricity than their surrounding municipalities, it's pretty frightening, yeah.
I will note that in their legislative priorities that were adopted by the board, there was, and Supervisor King, if I'm speaking this incorrectly, please correct me, but there was a piece in the legislative priorities that basically advocated that local authority be respected, and that there were no bills that were passed that would supplement, that would take away local authority on any land use decisions. So the board does see this as a major issue and spoke with our legislators about that, and I think that's an issue that we'll continue to push throughout this General Assembly session. Thanks. When the General Assembly is able to meet, because there's currently no water in the city of Richmond. So
It may be providential.
We are using, the figures that we're using for the dollar amounts in the CIP are what is being provided to us by VDOT in the SMART portal. There is a contingency that's added onto those, but obviously as we review the CIP annually, we will be looking to the project portal to make sure that we're in line with those costs as they're projected. Yeah, it's a standard inflation rate that they apply.
You mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
what's the,
You're not on.
what's the availability in the consultant world to say, okay, thanks for signing the contract, we'll get started next week?
Generally speaking, we can get under contract and begin work within a month or two. Our goal is to get the RFP out, advertised, and to be doing interviews with consultants so that we can start very early in the next budget year, so July or August. Again, that will put us at the very end of Montgomery Matters, because our plan is to adopt the comprehensive plan at the end of 2025. So we'll have some good marching orders for a consultant by the end of the year.
And your comment about faith-based properties wanting to build housing for rental and how you deal with that from a taxing point of view reminded me that I read today that Buncombe County, North Carolina, which is the area around Asheville, is still requiring the folks that lost their homes to pay their property taxes, real estate taxes. So our problem is not quite that large.
Right.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Justin, would you just comment on how the discussion and possible revision of the villages, where that's going to fit in?
Yes. So the last comprehensive plan, as you'll remember, set a goal that 80% of all development in the county would occur within the two towns or within the village areas. So really the villages were a vehicle for development concentration where services existed. The challenge that we've found is that not all villages are created equally. There are unique challenges in all of the villages. There are some villages that have the capacity for more development, and other villages that are reaching their peak capacity. So what we're working with the consultants on is a really systematic analysis of where development should be going and where it should not be going. Some of that is also going to be informed by the capital outlay plan that the Public Service Authority is undertaking on where the extension of public water and sewer lines are planned over the next 10 years. So all of that is going to factor in to help us determine what criteria will be used to define villages going forward. That will also help us to determine if village boundaries need to be adjusted. The other thing that we benefit from, particularly in transportation planning, are if we have an intersection that we've identified as a problem intersection. If that is located outside of a village, it is going to score much lower for transportation funding than if it were located inside the village. So there's an opportunity if there's a transportation issue that we see that's adjacent to the village, adjusting the village boundary to be able to help us plan for the future. So all of that will be factored in. I don't want it to appear, though, that if a village no longer meets criteria, that we're just going to abandon it and not provide planning assistance in that area. There are a number of other tools that we can use, both through our urban development area identification and other planning tools that we can use to make sure that development is done in a very intentional way in those areas, even if they're not villages.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? We're not having liaison reports tonight.
Those that are here, we can, but we don't have many.
Oh, then we do have the opportunity for Mr. King to grace us with his eloquence. Mr. King.
Appreciate each one of you getting out in this warm weather tonight and everything. Don't have much to report. Our next meeting, we'll be going through our reorganization. And then February, we'll be reorganizing PSA board. But as far as going on that solar panels and stuff, you know, that's something we need to fight, because it would take away from the citizens. As you stated, you know, somebody wanted to put one next to them. If this board and our board denied it, then they went to Richmond, and somebody, and I'm not being mean when I say this, but somebody's probably never been around gets to override us.
Yeah.
And the citizens wouldn't have no recourse to go back and fuss about them. But I do appreciate Justin, everybody working on that. And one quick thing, please keep an eye on your neighbors, check on them in this cold weather. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Miller.
Sir,
Tourism.
tourism is not meeting this week, and will meet in the near future.
How much younger were you when tourism met last?
Tourism hadn't been invented
Report
then.
in 3 years. The meeting's always next week.
It only meets 4 times a year.
Oh,
so
okay.
why do you think I chose it?
Well, that's good planning on your part. Mr. Workman?
Yes, we met in December. Things are going well with the Reiner Park. Things are going well with Whitethorn and the boat ramp out there, and they're working on improvements to the Huckleberry, the bridges. They're doing some bridge work, replacing those. So all is well in Parks and Rec.
Good. Thank you, sir. If there are no other comments.
I have a few things, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't.
I just
Oh,
have I have a few items. Again, I'm not Mrs. Hopkins.
You're Bree,
I'm
that's
not
right.
Mrs. Hopkins. That's completely understandable.
I apologize.
Just a few items of note. For those of you who have your real estate disclosure forms with you this evening, if you'll get those to Shelley, we'll get those turned into county administration for you. If you don't have them this evening and have not yet turned those in, those are due February the 3rd. That's a Monday. Please get those in so we don't have to track you down before our February meeting. I'm happy to announce that we have been interviewing candidates for our transportation planner position. We have several strong candidates. We will likely be moving to a second round of interviews to further narrow down our decision, but we do hope to have an offer extended by the end of the month for that individual. We'll also be beginning our search in the next few weeks for a GIS analyst. As Bree shared with you in December, Michael Sutherland has retired and Cody Andrews was promoted to a senior GIS analyst in our department. So we'll be looking for someone to join our GIS team to assist Cody. We will also be in the next several months beginning interviews for our summer internship program. We're very excited last summer to have had Riley Thompson with us. And really reinvigorated our internship program, and we have a number of students that have reached out asking if they can intern with us over the summer. So we'll be holding interviews, which will be very exciting. And then the last reminder I have for you this evening is just of the Regional Planning Commissioners Training event. That will be held here at the Government Center on April 16th. That's a Wednesday evening. So that will be the night of our normal second meeting of the month. So you should already have that on your calendars, so we hope all of you will join us. That will begin at 5:30 with a mingle in the lobby, followed by dinner, and then our training sessions. I will have an update for you next month on the topics of that training, but we hope that you will all join us. Please be safe. We do have some more winter weather moving in this weekend. But I just want to say thank you to VDOT for their diligent work in getting our roads clear, and our own grounds crews here at the Government Center for making sure that our parking lots and our sidewalks are clear and keeping us all safe and warm. We're very glad the heat is working this week. But I have nothing else for you this evening.
Thank you. You have the upcoming meeting dates for the next 3 months. And if there are no other words of wisdom for this group, I will wish you all a happy new year and declare this meeting adjourned.